Welcome to If Taps Could Talk, a brand new series in association with Beamish. Lads, there's nothing better than an Irish pub, and let's face it, they're like sacred spaces here in Ireland. The best pub has the perfect spot for you to sit down and watch people go by. You know what, sometimes the decor hasn't been changed in a good while, and you know the barman has seen and heard it all. Pubs aren't just about drink, there's so much more to it. But you know what makes having a pint even better? That sharing experience with someone else. Across this series, we are going to be looking at some of the most iconic pubs in Ireland. The ones with genuine character, untold history, and bucket loads of charm. We'll be looking at what makes each pub so iconic and why it's held so dearly to the locals. So whether you're here for the company, the chat, or a pint, pull yourself up a chair and let's get started. Today on If Taps Could Talk, we are coming to you from Shoot the Crows pub in Sligo, one of Sligo's most beloved pubs. It's dating around back 1876. As soon as you walk into this pub, it is steeped in community and in tradition. No matter where you walk, you can hear the hum of someone talking, and you might even hear some traditional music as well. Today's guest, speaking of tradition, speaking of community, her name is Easkey Britton, and by God has she got a story to tell. So, Easkey, you brought us to a diamond in the west of Ireland. Shoot the Crows.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, I love this place. Here we are in Sligo. I haven't been in so long, but it hasn't changed a bit. I think I probably first ended up coming in here as a kid with Dad. He's an artist, but also an architect, and designed loads of the interiors of pubs and did the sandblasted glass for the windows. Wow. And the traditional style, and would have done the ones here too. So.
Well, look, I think we need to raise a glass to him and to Shoot the Crows.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Sláinte.
Oh yes. The one thing when you walk into this place, you can see the history seeping out of it. What was your early memories of this place walking in here? Like, were you a little girl, your family were coming in?
I think it was just this feeling of it, just the energy, it pulsing, jam-packed, and because it's this narrow corridor, but just the music, the conversation, a lot of it, just amazing music sessions would happen just right here. And being that like up close to these incredible musicians, this part of the, the country is amazing for trad music, all kinds of music, Steve Wickham, No Crows, Waterboys.
I was just going to say that because last night we were here and he was there and somebody had said, and I was like, would you stop? And then when I heard the history about that, about, he kind of formed the band here. That's like, where else in the world would you see that? Like, if you were an American coming in here now, this is the perfect thing. You're seeing a talent with more talent just here, and they're playing music. And it's been like that for years.
Yeah, and it's just really like kind of just under the radar. It's just very relaxed. Yeah.
We were talking about art earlier on, so there's a piece of art right behind me here. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So I just remember early memories of this place would be this figure behind you, the Shoot the Crows kind of, I suppose, the logo or the emblem, and Slania is the character, and Dad had him in a comic book, like a graphic novel. And so it's this, we grew up steeped in all those stories, the myths and legends of Ireland through Dad's artwork especially. And I suppose it's a play on the story of Cuchulainn, who had the Slania would be this kind of like this rage or primeval energy that warriors would get and would take over, and they go kind of, I suppose, berserk, like the Vikings, the berserkers in the Viking era. And we had the equivalent here. And so it's just about something about this, those stories of, and then with Slania, the challenge of having to find balance, being accessing this incredible power and energy that maybe came from some hidden source or the earth itself, but that it could take you over and you could lose control. And then how do you contain that and control that or channel it? And actually, interestingly, Cuchulainn, who had that same power and ability, was sent to train with two warrior goddesses in Scotland, who helped find, I suppose, the balance of the masculine, feminine energies and that are in all of us. So it's kind of, but there's just, like a lot of Irish mythologies and stories, are just these layers and layers to it. So, and then there'll be a lot of stories like that here.
I was just going to say that, like, it's literally in these four walls that you have all these stories. You wouldn't be able to
tell what's real and what's myth, and it would just blur.
And then I heard that, because the name is quite different, Shoot the Crows.
Yeah.
And I heard that crows were pests back in the day, and if you shot them, that you got money for them. And then the owner of this pub then, when you brought in the crows, he accepted the crows as payment for a pint, and then he'd go off and then he'd get the money then for the crows afterwards. When you hear stories like that, you're going, come on, this is mad, but it's true, it happened.
Pearl, Prechons, crows. I think it also comes from like with Cuchulainn as well in the battlefield. They didn't know because he was wounded and he asked his warriors to tie him to a post to keep him standing upright so he could still fight all the enemy warriors. And it wasn't until a crow landed on his shoulder that they knew he was actually dead, because they were afraid to approach him until then. So there is something, I think, too, about the crows being the messenger from the other world, so that it lends itself to a kind of fear. But they have a power as well, and maybe that unsettles us as humans.
Can we talk about your childhood?
Yeah.
You, from what I've been reading, like you had such a colourful, lovely, and I'm jealous of being from Navan and not being around the sea, and you know, your parents steeped in history and all that. Can you talk to us a bit about that?
Yeah, it's I think being here as well in the northwest of Ireland, I've such a strong kind of place connection to here because it's really shaped who I am. Growing up in Resnowla in Donegal, not far from here, but born to surfing parents on this amazing beach where both my parents actually learned to surf, and me and my sister learned to surf, and then there's the next generation that are starting to learn to surf. So it's very much like this upbringing where we literally have salt water in our blood, and then these stories are all revolve around the sea and the ocean. So growing up as well at a time when surfing was much more kind of fringe. And
can I actually ask you about that? When you were going to school and all that?
Yeah.
Was anyone else in your class surfing, or was this? So how was that as you, a little girl, going into school, and you doing something so niche, and you know, it would kind of open up your eyes to the world, whereas everyone else is probably playing maybe GA or football or stuff like that. What was that like?
I used to sort of like duck, and if a ball came towards me, I had no interest at all. But it was, it just for me, because it's just what I knew best. Like the sea has just been my constant companion. It's where I feel most at home. So it was just natural and normal in terms of my upbringing, and the beach is my playground. But then it wasn't like when I went to school, it was just like, it was an odd kind of crazy thing to be doing. And kids would do it in the summertime, because at least it was a bit warmer. So we had no wetsuits. Until I started, I was just surfing in my togs, you know. And that makes me sound really old.
When you even think about that now, like there's actual shops for all this stuff now, you know. That's go back 15 years, you could say.
Kids, wetsuits for 1-year-olds as soon as they're born. So I mean that changed things too, and I think where I grew up in Resnowla as well. My grandparents also helped fund and build one of the first surfing clubhouses in the country. So we just always had access down to this place where we could hang out, get surfboards, and then go and surf together, like with another like groups of kids in the summertime. But in wintertime, it would just be me. Like my mum would, my sister when she was younger before she started, but mum would pick me up from school. Wintertime, you'd only have maybe half an hour of daylight, and I'd be trying to wriggle out of my uniform in the back of the car and get into the wetsuit, and so I'd have maximised my surf time. But it's still, the wetsuits were rubbish, and I'd be frozen, and mum would be flashing the headlights, like it would actually be dark, and she'd be like, Easkey, where are you? You've got to get out of the water. And then I remember just the memory of her having to peel like the wetsuit off me, because I'm like, I'm frozen, and I wouldn't even be able to speak. But I loved it, so it's it's a madness.
When did you realise that you're like, I can do something with this now, you know, like, because we need to talk about the achievements when it comes to surfing with you. You know, like you're known worldwide for this, and when I was looking it up, which I think everyone does, you start looking at, oh, you've done this, you've done this, you've done this. When did that start? Like, what age were you?
Well, I've been standing on a surfboard probably, the earliest photo we have, I'm about 4 years old. Dad pushing me off in a wave, and in Resnowla, so probably from around then. But I was in the water since before I can remember. Like I don't have a memory of the first wave. Yeah, it's just like I've just always been doing it, like walking.
How did you get from being there in your home to then competing? Like, what journey was that? get to that?
Yeah, I think for me it was more about, Dad calls like surfing like the good addiction. So it is. So you're always just finding ways to get your fix. And I was just always trying to work out, well, what's the best, like how can I keep doing this? I want to spend like any time I have, I want to be surfing. So what's the best way to be able to continue to do that? And so I ended up on the Irish like surf team from the age of 12. And that was a great vehicle then to actually go and travel with surfing.
And was that nice as well, you know, being 12 years of age and then finding other people who were 12 years of age that had the same interest, the same graw for it, that people were you were going, these are my tribe, this is my people.
Well, it was kind of odd because there wasn't actually that many kids doing it. And so it was, what was probably good was that there was a whole mix of ages. So with surfing, and it's still to this day, it's great. It's where you have this real melting pot of people from all kinds of backgrounds, all kind of age groups doing it together in the water. Because it isn't like you have to go and like book a football pitch or, you know, it's not, there's no designated space. And even in terms of ability too, it can be really mixed. And so as a kid on the team, like when I was training on like the Irish surfing squad, the national squad, it was often with a lot of the senior division. I think I competed even in senior events from the age of 14.
Wow.
It was probably too young.
Did that probably help you in a way because you were competing up against them? As much as you were growing, you were probably achieving more than the people that probably kind of hit their cap when it came to it. Do you think?
Yeah, I think that I suppose, and that's also the mentorship of particular other women. When I was 9 years old, and then the national champion at the time, multiple times national champion Zoe Lally, who also lived in Rasnala, and so we would have surfed together, and she took me under her wing in those early days. And I think that was obviously I had my parents as well, but you get a certain age as a kid where even though they have so much wisdom, you don't listen to them.
Of course.
Even though they're right, especially if they're right. And so I think that was good as well. So for me, surfing is a great way to travel, develop these friendships and relationships with other people, and always being out of my comfort zone, be that with the waves and the surf break, but also even having to get to grips with traveling at such a young age. I traveled solo for a long time, even through my my teens and early 20s. So as a young woman, that was kind of interesting to navigate.
What is that buzz like? How can you describe the buzz of being on a wave? Like when you realize, right, not that many people can get this, not that many people will ever experience this. Like, are there nerves? Are you afraid? Are you buzzing?
It's all of it. It's hard to, I mean, it doesn't make any sense if you were to describe surfing to someone who has no clue about it.
Is there a lot of discipline when you're doing it, or?
Well, as in discipline, isn't that, as in, it's more like maybe dedication, but that's not the hard part because you actually do become addicted to it, and so you just can't go without it. I mean, after, I think after a week of not surfing, you'll see how even the energy will shift in our household. My partner surfs as well, and so does my dad, and you just get edgier and crankier. We need to get surfing.
Get to the sea.
Yeah. But I think what it is, it's so fleeting. It is a madness. You put all this effort and energy into trying to get out through these waves, and then you pick this wave. It's a wave of energy that's moving through the water, and you're trying to align yourself with it and time it so that you can catch it for this brief moment in time, those final moments of a wave's life cycle before it crashes onto the shore, and you're going to join it and tap into that for a moment, and then it's gone. And literally it lasts a few seconds. A 10-second wave is actually a really long ride. But it alters the perception of time, and you're having this, deepens this sense of connection. When you're in that flow state on a wave, you're not able to think about anything else. Like, we live in a time where our minds are so busy and occupied with all these thoughts and stresses or worries, but it just completely goes. It's like your mind clears, and it's only after the wave we're actually able to even think about what happened.
When we talk about highlights for you, what has been for you when it comes to being on the waves? Which ones will always kind of be in your heart forever, or the one that you'll always kind of, we could be here, a night full of people? And we're going, Easkey, tell us the story. Which one is the one that...
It's remarkable, again, how, there's so much happens in our lives, and I find it hard sometimes to remember what happened yesterday. I'm a busy mom to twin toddlers. But a wave, even though it only lasted a few seconds, I could recall one I caught when I was like 16, and I remember the exact, maybe even like the date and time. So the one that obviously stands out for me it was like winter solstice, so December 21st, 2013 at Mullaghmore Head, which is now kind of world famous as a big wave spot. But in those days there was a small crew of us really pioneering big wave surfing at the time. So big wave surfing it was first initiated by accessing these surf breaks with jet skis. So, and using the power of a jet ski to tow a surfer into a wave, because these waves are so big and they're moving so fast.
Would you have to be far out then for that? Technically, yeah.
Yeah, so you'd be right out. So it's like a whole other kind of ball game altogether. And now there's surfers kind of breaking all kinds of barriers and limits, paddling into these waves. But at a certain size, you can no longer paddle them. You do what's called this tow-in surfing. So you have this rope at the back of a jet ski, and you're holding onto. You're strapped into a tow board, which is weighted down so that it doesn't skip out of the water, and you have your as much padding on your body as you can, and a helmet, and then away you go. And it's a partnership you worked with the driver, and then we switch around. So I did it for years with my cousin Aill Britton, and we worked together in this tight crew, just getting to know this wave.
Was the big moment.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's such a fleeting moment, probably only like 10, 12 seconds of an actual ride on a wave, but it's not just that moment. It's like it's a culmination of everything that's gone before, building up this intimacy and knowledge of a wave, of its moods, its patterns, how it works, and then aligning your own energy on the day with the energy of the wave. And you can't be too stuck in your head. And so it was just one of those rare moments where you actually, for me, I was able to just drop into my body and let go of any of the noise or buzz. And so that's kind of...
That went everywhere, didn't it? And everyone was talking about it afterwards.
I guess I got into big wave surfing because I'd been competing for a really long period of time, and actually had got really burnt out from that. And it's weird, because I grew up in a family where, for Dad especially, the values around surfing were about freedom, that self-expression, creativity. It wasn't anything to do with, as far from
social media
being commercialized or competitive or being judged, or we're trying to reduce surfing to the sum of its parts. And so there was something so liberating and freeing about big wave surfing, where it was really just about you and this wave, and how you were meeting each other, and needing to actually just like this kind of stripping away of ego altogether. And so for me then it just seems a little bit at odds when you bring in those like competitive elements, or the judging, and that wasn't really the motivation, I suppose.
It takes it away from us.
Well, for me, because it was more about this intimacy with this particular wave, actually, even though I did it in other places. But
when you do it at home, it's something different.
Yeah.
Where in Ireland do you think is the untapped areas for surfers, or is there untapped areas now? Is it now become a thing where everyone knows? I think my friends went down to Lahinch last year. Is that an area? I know they said they were going surfing now. I don't know if they were or not, but
well, it used to be a time when when Dad started out surfing, and I even remember going on surf trips with him, and you saw another car with surfboards on the roof, and you'd stop and flag each other down, and then have a chat about where you were going. And that was the only way to actually exchange knowledge or information about surf breaks. There was no surf apps, no weather forecasts, and you used to stay up at the 9 o'clock news. You get to stay up late, like 9:30 they did the weather report, but they used to show the pressure charts, and you get to see the swell systems in the Atlantic. So as a kid, we'd sit up late before school to get to watch this, so we'd learn how to read the charts and predict what the surf would be like.
That is a great memory, and
it even had in the back of the newspaper, and they don't do it anymore. But so I had a scrapbook where I cut them out, and I'd stick down, that was a 993 low pressure system, or and then you'd record what the surf was like for that kind of energy of a swell, and you'd build up this knowledge that just seemed like natural. But it's probably a bit of a strange hobby.
No, I like that. Where in the West Coast? It's predominantly the West of Ireland?
The West, I mean, Ireland
southeast maybe
is so uniquely positioned, like where it's positioned in the Atlantic. It just catches the full brunt of those swells. But also interesting to notice, because of a lifetime of observing that, how I think a lot of surfers are so immersed in the ocean, you see you're at the front line of change. And something as kind of vast and constant as the ocean, it's crazy in my lifetime to see how rapidly it's changing. So it's becoming far less predictable. There used to be, quite consistent patterns seasonally with waves and wave energy and storms.
Is it frustrating seeing what you see and what you've seen over the years, and for people not to understand in Ireland, or not that they don't care, but do they know about it enough to kind of go, Jesus, this is bad, like we need to do something?
Well, I think the biggest issue with our relationship and why we're seeing things fall apart in all levels, when it comes to our mental health, socially, economically, and the environment, like it's all connected, and it stems from this disconnect, this growing separation between ourselves and each other, our bodies, and especially like the land around us. Like, and I say land, I mean earth, water, nature. We like to call it, quote unquote, the environment, but essentially it's an extension of who we are, like we're part of it. And I think we've lost that, and yet in Ireland especially, there's just under the surface is that knowing, that knowledge in there, in terms of even in the place names and these little reminders of a time when our ancestors really understood that ecological connection, interdependence with all life, and it's still there. But yeah, we've work to do to reclaim it. And I think surfing could be one way to do that.
Is there a thing now? I heard a word recently, rewilding, that we're rewilding ourselves now. And is it because of COVID that people were stuck in their homes, that they were looking at area, if they were beside the sea or they're in their 5 kilometre or whatever it was, they were going into lakes, or they were going into the rivers or into the seas, and they were getting something. Did you notice there has been a trend in that over the last while?
Absolutely.
Why is that? Why are we, like, I did it myself, like during the whole lot of the lockdown, I was in the 40 foot in Dublin every single day, and if it wasn't that, it was Sea Point.
At first, it was probably, the trend might have been there just before COVID, but it definitely exploded throughout that time. And again, it's because we lost, I suppose, access to like the gym and the swimming pool, and then had to find our just nearest body of water maybe then to get our fix. And I was living just outside Westport at the time, and going down to the nearest beach there and actually seeing how kids then were learning how to swim in the sea and not the pool, and what a different experience that is. But what it is about the water, especially the cold water, it's just amazing, the impact on us. Like, it completely, the connection between like humans and water is so profound, and it radically alters us in so many ways.
For my birthday, it was a really strange birthday. We all just decided, let's not have a dinner. Let's go and we'll jump into the sea, and then we'll go for a pint. I was like, that's a great idea. It was just something completely different. And I brought two of my friends who'd never been into the sea swimming before. They had their togs on, and they were walking in, they were walking out, walking in, walking out. And we were all in at that stage now. We were frozen. We were like, come on. And this lady walked over. Like, I'm saying she was in her 80s because she said she was in her 80s. And she says, what you should do is, if you're ever doing it, get the water and put it on the back of your neck. And they did it, and it happened, but I don't know whether they were just terrified of her. Is that, like, do people ask you about tips and tricks of that? Because people want to get into the sea. We're in Ireland, it's freezing half the time. Are there little tips and tricks like that for people?
Yeah, absolutely. So I realise...
Very basic question, but I think that some people who want to do that,
yeah.
like, what is it?
There's a few things. So when I was researching my last book, Ebb and Flow, was looking at that more human relationship with water, and how do we deepen that connection, and what impact does water have on us. And I learned actually I interviewed a lot of, so I'd been researching in that area on blue health, and so I had through that kind of more Western science lens. But then for the book, I also spoke to a lot of more indigenous sort of wisdom keepers and water protectors, and they're talking about how just that, like the importance of that kind of attunement with the body of water we're entering or engaging with before we just plunge right in. So which also helps prepare the body and the mind. So you're almost trying to create this sort of empathic connection, like with the energy of the ocean and how you're showing up. And one way to do it, and I realized I used to always do this when I was competing, as a way of almost just ritual to like ground myself. But I would do that with the water. I would go and I'd always sort of like splash it on my forehead. before I went in, like almost like a blessing, like you bless yourself with holy water. But even that, it starts, especially if the water hits here, the nose and this part of your face. There's these sensory receptors that like thermoreceptors. So it helps your body kind of begin to regulate its temperature, to adjust to the temperature of the water. And the same then, that's even at the back of your neck, that's what's happening. So it helps, why you do that is it helps reduce the kind of the shock factor for like 60 to 70% water. Probably when we're born, even now we're probably 60% water.
That is mad.
Salt water. So
That is
there's
crazy.
a lot there in terms of that affinity. And I think the healing power of water is definitely in some way connected to arguably the time when we felt safest and most held and protected is when we were in the amnion, in the womb of our mothers. And then coming out into the world is that kind of, I'm sure we also carry something of a bit of a trauma from that separation into this, like blasted into this world. And then we try to find our way back almost to water as a way to reconnect with that feeling again, because the body does hold this memory.
Easkey, we have so much more to talk about. This is absolutely fascinating. We're going to take a break and we're back after this. Welcome back to If Taps Could Talk. Today we're at Easkey Britton. There's so much we can say, you know, surfing, everything got to do with the sea. You're working around, traveling. When you're chatting to people, how do you start all that? Like, where do you begin?
I know. It all revolves around the water, to be fair.
That's it. Well, look, before we continue on, Sláinte.
Sláinte. I think, we should also probably talk about how we have this paradoxical relationship with water. I mean, it's life-giving, but it's also life-taking. And it's an environment as humans we can't survive in for very long.
A lot of Irish people, I find, there is a fear, and I think when the summer months come, like there's always that fear in your head that, you know, people just think that we're going to go in the water thinking that it's going to be safe and all that. Is that worrying for you sometimes when it comes to summer all the time and you're hearing on the news or reading on the news some awful stories happening?
Yeah, I think there's like this legacy of maybe a lot of loss and grief around the ocean as well, and the sea, especially, and it's just been so rough and violent on the west coast of Ireland in particular. But also in terms of like our kind of colonial legacy too, of having lost a lot of that knowledge about how to be with the ocean, with the sea, how to understand it, how to read it. You know, and for me growing up, it being quite unique to sort of literally learn this language of the sea and building up. When I talk about that intimacy, I mean building up that knowing and understanding. So being able to discern the difference of a day when it's okay to go in the water and a day actually when this is not for me. And so that's really vital. But that takes time, you know, and it takes awareness and it takes more this knowledge sharing. And so if you're new to it, then it's really important. And now it's great because there are so many groups, but if you can, you know, join, there's lots of different kind of even informal swimming groups or when there's lifeguards back on the beach. But it's always about like talk to people who are regular users, like, you know, surfers or swimmers about this, where you're going to go into the water. Before you go in the water, always think about where and how are you going to get back out of the water.
And it sounds silly even saying things, that, but they are the things that you're kind of caught up in the moment, aren't you? If you're with your friends and it's a sunny day and
and it's always, it's like developing any new relationship, it's like, you know, go slowly, don't rush headlong in, and you just got to get to know each other over time. So when it comes to cold water especially, it's just building it up really slowly. So going in first time maybe like 10 seconds and then 30, and then, but don't feel like you have to stay in there, because if you wait until you feel really cold in the water and then get out, your body temperature continues to drop. And then that's when things like hypothermia could set in. Also, if you jump straight in and you're not used to the cold, you can get what's called like cold water shock. So when your breathing becomes really rapid and shallow, and that can cause problems. So it's really important just to focus on slowing the breath, relaxing the body, and really just listening to your body as well, and going with that. And don't feel like you have to push anything. Never push or force anything with water, because it will push back.
We have to talk about women in surfing. So when you started off when you were 4, you were competing 14 years of age, you could say.
Wow,
before then, actually.
I was 6 years old and the under-8 national champion.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Was there, I'm just thinking that now, I was like 14, I was going, that's young. That's younger. Growing up, were there men, I know you said there was someone in your locality who was really good, but when you were kind of, going around the world, what was that like? Was there many girls doing it?
Yeah, it was at the time, in order to sort of make it a surf career, I mean, you don't really, you're flying by the seat of your pants. You're lucky if you can kind of get from like one month to the next. But it was, there's 2 routes. You go down the competitive route and you do competitions and you start to do that professionally for prize money and you get sponsorship. Or there was this other route which was like this sort of, we call it like the quote unquote free surfer. So you could travel, you documented your journeys, your adventures, kind of more like that, surfing waves and offbeat places, or so telling more the story of surfing. But that was really male dominated because it was often like, guys heading off solo traveling by themselves, which, there's lots of things they don't have to think about because they're men in the world. And then so for women doing it, there wasn't any really roadmap to follow. Yeah.
And how did you navigate that?
I was just too impatient. I didn't want to wait around for anyone else to get their shit together to go and travel, and I just needed to get going. So I just had that energy when I was younger, and still really do, but I'm definitely a bit more rooted. I loved it, and I think it was surfing for me was this vehicle to create connection across cultures. So it never felt like, it was that way to, you were sharing something with someone else from another culture that then created a connection if you were surfing together, and then afterwards, and then just it was a time, before smartphones or any of that as well too. So you actually had to strike up conversations.
And where were you? Where did you go?
Well, one of them obviously was standout trips. I first went in 2010 to Iran, which is, the southeastern part of Iran is the Baluchistan kind of region. It borders Pakistan. It's in the Indian Ocean. It's not a very well-known surf spot.
That's what I was thinking. I was going, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of surfing and like modern surf culture is very kind of guilty of this kind of similar to like colonial mindset of traveling and exploring foreign lands and discovering amazing waves. When actually there's probably been a very ancient cultural relationship with water in the ocean there for millennia. And in Iran, there certainly is a unique relationship is also with the sea, even though people don't even probably realize I didn't even know there was.
And what were the locals like? What were the local surfers like?
It was a sort of such surprise and curiosity. Like, we didn't meet any hostility whatsoever. Just this like, wow, what are you doing? And it was great, I think. And then showing up in a place where I think there's a few guys who passed through a few years before and did a thing, like a surf thing for Storm Rider Guide. It's a surf guide. But there was no women that we'd known of who'd surfed there, and there was no surfers, like local surfers there at the time. And so and for many, it was the first time when I went surfing off this incredible desert coast. It looks like kind of almost like a Martian landscape. There was the first time they'd ever seen surfing, and so to see it. How strange that would have been. They associated surfing with women. And then we went back again. It was a Marion Poiseau, a French filmmaker. And we went back we went back for like many years over from 2010 to 2016 or 2017. But we went back a second time. We actually went with 2 Iranian sportswomen. Mona Siraji was a snowboarder. Shala Yazini was a swimmer and a diver. So already pioneering sportswomen in their own areas. Rocked up at this very remote part of Iran that they'd never been to either. And we're all out surfing, and then this local boy from the local fishing village came, and he had this little like piece of foam, this awful styrofoam stuff that goes into but they use that to keep the fish cool, but it's very floaty. And so I remember I used to have my first bodyboard was actually like that. So he was there in the shore break, kind of like ride these waves and in watching us. And then he came up and asked, "Hey, is this something, boys can do too?" Because he just thought, well, this has got to be a girl's thing only, is surfing stuff. And now, like, fast forward as well, a decade later, I'm still in contact with the the community over there, and they're still
thriving
surfing.
now,
It's
yeah.
mixed, boys and girls, all different kinds of backgrounds. It's not without its challenges, but
I was just going to say that how does their culture fit into all that?
yeah,
The surfing.
I guess what I learned is that surfing has the capacity to create this amazing cross-cultural connection. But then there are these different sets of barriers depending on who you are. We don't all have access to it. Even globally, like I was shocked to realize that nowhere in the world is there, equal access. So there's a huge gender gap in our ability even to swim unassisted recreationally. And so that really, between men and women, or males and females. So that really limits our capacity to access those benefits that I'm writing about, that the water has, that I've experienced my whole life for our well-being, that blue health effect. And especially for women, it can be so transformative and healing because it's such an embodied experience.
And you talk about, you have 2 books, so you talk about this in your books about that.
Yeah, first was Saltwater in the Blood, more of a memoir. There's a lot of what we're talking about, and as well as Ebb and Flow, looking at that more, the big, broader human relationship with water. And the first book I wrote was 50 Things to Do by the Sea, which would be a great starting place for someone when I'm talking about learning the language of the sea. There are loads of really simple practices in that for how to actually do that in a practical way. But getting back to this, it was realizing that the ocean could hold so much sort of fear and risk, and be a sort of exclusionary place where
Because we don't know
welcome.
what's underneath it. That's the thing. Like, we're only learning.
Or also you don't feel welcome because of how you look, because it's for most and many parts of the world, being at the beach and being in the water, it's not considered, culturally or for whatever reason, largely cultural social norms. Women and girls aren't encouraged to go to the beach or to go in the water, and
even
so
how they dress, you could say. There's some places
it's
that
really
they can't.
restrictive.
Yeah, of course.
And then it becomes really limiting, and it just fuels that narrative, the dominant narrative that this is not a place for women and girls. So you don't even think about going there. And then actually seeing how through these, how you can transform the ocean as that place of fear and danger into one that's really transformative and empowering. And even another example then, after we created this, in Iran, through a series of workshops called Be Like Water, that I ran or facilitated with Shireen Garami, Iran's first female triathlete. Over a number of years, we would go every summer. And there'd be these women-only workshops, and we started, I realized it was Shireen, who was new to surfing, but obviously really familiar with her own culture, reminded me the importance of that beginner's mindset of you need to feel safe in order to tap into the playfulness of water to overcome the fear. And so we started out in a swimming pool, just sharing stories of what water meant to us, our experience of water. Some women had never fully immersed their bodies in water. You're living in a desert area and water is this precious resource, or had never even been to the beach or into the sea. And all of that can then be overwhelming. So we just stripped it back to the basics, connecting with our breath and the body and that feeling, that sort of sensual experience of it even. And just then that transformation, the confidence that would come, and realizing our own bodies, when we allow ourselves to really connect with water.
Does that still
amazing.
shock you going into places like that, knowing that there's such a disconnect with people in different cultures?
Yeah, and all around the world is what shocked me.
Yeah.
You don't have to go very far.
Really, like in Ireland as well.
Yeah,
is it
and there's
hard?
so much shame then.
Oh, yeah, why is that? Is that just old Ireland of shame? I don't mean old
just
mythical
as
Ireland,
an
but as in
adult,
like
that
50s, 60s,
if you don't know
70s.
how to swim now, especially because
There's a lot of people. My dad doesn't
cold
know
water
how to
swimming
swim.
is so
Yeah,
cool
yeah.
that you're even less likely to sort of hold up your hand and go, actually, the words women would use then to describe their experience of freedom, it feels like flying, or that, and then we kind of went from the pool. So we just took these small steps and made it playful, no focus on performance. It wasn't about surfing. It was just about building up again this intimacy with our body and the waves and a playfulness. So jumping in the waves and letting yourself be carried and washed back onto the shore and allowing your body to soften and be like water rather than meeting it with resistance.
Yeah.
And it was funny then because we had mixed sessions on the beach then of doing these surfing workshops. And then the boys and the lads just wanted to grab their boards and charge straight out there. And then the women, after going through this experience, then gradually some were drawn to taking the boards out into the water, but they already had that kind of attunement, understood the energy of the waves, and they just took to it so much better.
You must have met so many different people throughout the way. Is there a book in the people that you've met and the stories that they've told on top of the 2 books that you have at the minute?
Oh, absolutely. It's like, people and the sea.
yeah, it is. Do you find that when it comes to water, like the one person I think that who has made a lot with it is Wim Hof. Have you seen any of his stuff? He seems to be more, I don't mean commercial, but everyone kind of knows him now because of the water. Is people like that good for the sea? Because then people are kind of knowing about sea and the water and the benefits.
Yeah, it's opened it up for so many people. I think anyone who's encouraging people to connect with their breath and with water can only be a good thing. And I've learned a lot actually from friends of mine who are free divers, but I did a lot of the free dive training, which is actually breathwork training, which is really about slowing your breath down, and then having this profound kind of body awareness. So maybe the opposite to the Wim Hof type of breathing where it's like fast and rapid. It's actually about the slowing down the breath and slower.
What was it like going home to your family in times going, hey, I'm going here now? Is it because they were a part of it as that journey with you as well? They understood, or was it like any other parent? They were going, just mind yourself, be careful.
Oh, I don't know. They probably just knew they couldn't hold me back, and maybe I would come to my senses eventually and come home. And then the waves are too good here, so yeah, I did make it back.
So water conservation, can you talk to us about your work with that or your worries about that?
Yeah, I suppose my approach to it, I studied environmental science, and that was driven from already a concern and wanting to protect what I loved most, and go into the area of marine conservation. Well, I quickly realized that we more importantly needed to understand humans rather than, and that the ocean is a very good job at not only taking care of itself, but taking care of us. So I think we felt needing to better understand that relationship we have with the ocean and how much we depend on it, and it's not the other way around. So that the ocean itself is our life support system, regulating everything. And even most of the air we breathe actually comes from the ocean. And how little of this then is actually common knowledge, common practice. But for me, the issue when it comes to, when we talk about things like water conservation or the impact on, say, water quality, and it stems from like a disconnect. Like we don't see it maybe as relevant to our lives. I do because I'm a surfer and I'm in it, but what about each and every one of us? And so if we saw ourselves as more part of nature, as bodies of water, of how we are part of and connected to the water that we drink, that we move through.
Like you're in it.
And I think that's key. It's like, how do we actually, to create that culture shift, create this awareness and appreciation, like fall in love with the land, with water again. And it has to, that happens through these, when you cultivate joy, when you cultivate wonder, playfulness, fuel that curiosity as early on as possible. That's the track I'm taking with it anyway.
Everything benefits, in the sea, and
that it's all connected. When people think about what's happening in Palestine, what has that got to do with me? It's all about this, the impact of this power over system is crushing all of us. These systems of oppression, which is leading to creating this toxic society, to conflict, to violence. And that's what's causing, also when we talk about these environmental issues, that's what they are. They're to do with these powers that are all about how much can we take, about extraction, instead of about being in good relationship with each other, including our more than human kin.
It sounds so simple, doesn't it? Your Instagram is where people can find everything, whether it's talks you're doing. I've seen some collaborations on your Instagram as well.
Oh yeah,
it's fascinating.
It's coming. Yeah, so I have been slowly emerging from the early stages of motherhood. Well, it's about pacing right now, isn't it? And about learning, drawing a lot of those lessons from the sea, about there's the tides have a certain movement and flow and rhythm and can't be rushed. So I'm trying to embody that energy, while also the excitement of this feeling this return of this creative energy that I didn't have for a while. In the kind of survival mode. So starting to create these spaces to bring people together to explore more creatively our own connection with the natural world through writings.
You know, looking at everything that you have done, your dad, I think, plays a big role, and he's here today.
Yeah.
A genuine character. We're
wingman.
having a Beamish, and he's going to have a chat with us as well.
Brilliant. Yes.
So a special guest with us today on If Taps Could Talk is Easkey's dad. It's Barry Britton. Barry, I've been looking forward to talking to you because you know a lot about this beautiful establishment we're in here today. Can you tell us? But actually, before you do, let's have a little cheers.
Sláinte.
Sláinte. And Beamish. Oh. Barry, these walls, what can you tell us about them?
Well, I say I would have first come across this place, it would have been probably the late 80s or maybe early 90s. One of those panes of glass there was broken, and there was very few people doing etched panes of glass in those days, so they wanted it replaced the same as what was there. So I got to meet the owners. I think his name was Ronan.
Ronan's still here to this day, yeah?
I think it was Ronan I met that time. Yeah, and remember he just long hair down to his waist at that stage. He probably has no hair now, I think.
I can confirm he still does have hair. He does, from what I remember last night. Yeah.
So I got to meet them at that time, and I thought this is a great spot. I'll have to be coming back here fairly often, you know.
What is it about places like Shoot the Crows around Ireland? You know, Beamish talks about genuine character. I kind of feel like that's just not about people. It's about pubs and community and conversations as well. What is it about Ireland when it comes to your local watering hole?
Well, good stout's a big help. you mightn't be saying anything with the first round, you know, but by the time the second round comes round, the conversation starts, you know. And it's where people always went for the news before any of this internet stuff or, you know, all that carry on we were talking about on the way down in the car. Like, the way you found out what was going on, you had to go to the pub to find out what the latest news was and who's doing what. But nowadays, it's all this crack on the phone.
The artwork and all the drawings and everything around here, can you tell us a bit about that? I know Easkey was talking behind me about a character here behind me today.
Oh, the Slania, yeah.
Yeah. What's your interpretation of that?
Oh, I'd be very keen on the Slania stuff. Couldn't believe it when I discovered it. That somebody's doing such unique stuff. Well, I would have been a fan of Jim Fitzpatrick's, you know, stuff, the warrior stuff, and his mythical, beautiful coloured mythical paintings. But then this Slania stuff is a whole different ball game. It's very edgy, you know, and it was in the 2000 AD comics were out at the time, and they were a great source of alternative art.
And is there any other mythical characters that people should know more about? Because we all know about Cuchulainn and all that. Is there anyone else?
What about Cuchulainn? Huh?
Literally right there in front of you on your t-shirt. Is there anyone else that, you know, people should delve into?
Queen Maeve is a big one around here.
Yes.
She'd be the big one around here. And I was very lucky there. I got my artwork reproduced in concrete for the new surf centre out in Strandhill. And I put Queen Maeve, she's actually surfing on a surfboard on the thing, and full Celtic stuff around her and that. And I Finn McCool on the other side, but it was just amazing to get my art etched into the concrete. Like, it was incredible looking, huge.
There you go. And we're talking about all these stories having a pint.
And she's buried out there in Knocknarea, in the top of Knocknarea. There's a wee bump on the top of Knocknarea. She was buried standing up in full armour, facing her enemy in Ulster. Yeah, she'd be on the curriculum at school.
Yeah. Can I ask you about Easkey and all the achievements that she's done? What's been the moment for you that you've been like, wow, I can't believe she's done that? Or can you pick out a moment?
It'd be pretty hard, but I could never watch her out at Mullaghmore. When she'd be going out to surf the big waves in Mullaghmore, I'd be going, oh fuck. and I'd head the other direction, you know. But my wife would head out, and she used to film Easkey at it, all right. And I'd look at the film all right afterwards, but there's no way I could have stood there and watched her. My little girl and these massive 30, 40-foot waves were going, oh, no.
And conquering them.
Yeah. So.
Did you ever try it yourself?
Not at all, not at Mullaghmore.
No.
We used to look at Mullaghmore and, all right, the waves will be good, so such and such a place. When you looked at Mullaghmore, but never would have thought of surfing. It's like a mutant wave, it's, a good wave, a good wave to me, a normal wave comes over like that, and you can get into the tube and surf. But Mullaghmore, it comes over like that, and then it's coming over like that, and then another bit comes out of it here, like a mutant,
And why is that? What is it about that area?
No, it's not that. It's why the hell do they want to surf it? I can't figure it out at all.
Wow. Barry, before we let the both of you go, we need to talk about Easkey's name. Can you tell us where it came from? Mm-hmm. The meaning of it as well is quite beautiful. Can you talk about that?
Well, it's the name itself, the word, is associated with fish, basically Easkey. And, I suppose the short answer is, well, if she was born a boy, she would have been called after the peak in Bundoran. So his name would be Peak. But we were delighted to have a girl, so it was Easkey. So he's named after a surf break in County Sligo, just down the road from here at Easkey, County Sligo. So there's a nice right wave and a nice left wave. So we spent a lot of time there, and Easkey spent a lot of time there when you were younger too. We used to go down there an awful lot, camp out and surf. Just camp in front of the wave and surf.
It has to be power in a naming. Like, I do wonder about it. Being named after a wave. And the wave is, there's two waves, as Dad said, a right and a left, and it's split by this river, Easkey River, which is a really important salmon river. It's how the place gets its name, Eask for fish. And what's really lovely now is that whole ecosystem is being taken care of by, there's an amazing, I suppose, nature restoration charity called Home Tree, who've now acquired a piece of the around Easkey River. A lot of it's kind of upland bog, and there's a little bit of like native woodland still left, a lot like hazel trees. So it's gorgeous to see that that's been like cared for, and that the water quality will improve, and then that's so important again for the waves that we enjoy, and then the power of the naming. I love it as well. Easkey, it just reminds me of the mythology and legend, like the salmon of knowledge, and in that story itself is a reminder of how like our ancestors had such a close relationship with the life cycle of a salmon, with the river, and had to understand all of that, and perhaps maybe we will again. So
yeah, I didn't realise all that when I was picking her name.
Before we finish up, can I just say this has been one of the most loveliest chats, and I think that your mum and dad have a big part to play in everything that we've spoken about today. And I think your childhood, to me, comes across as such a lovely, beautiful, loved and open childhood. I think that's because of you and your wife. And Mum, there's just something about it. I felt like I was part of it as you were telling the stories about, from your name, from surfing, from getting into the sea. So let's do a toast to Easkey. Sláinte.
Sláinte Easkey.